Hi, everybody. Welcome to part two of AI Decoded. I'm Michelle Brigman, and I've spent over 2 decades creating award-winning CX strategies for global iconic brands like Dell, Citi, Medallia, 7-Eleven. And now I take all of that hard-won wisdom and those lessons to help mid-market and enterprise companies as an independent CX consultant and leadership coach for Advantage CX. Joining me today is my wonderful friend and former colleague, Frank Mendoza.
Hi, Michelle. Great to be here again for part two of our webinar series. My name is Frank Mendoza. I am founder and managing partner at Catalytics. At Catalytics, we help brands to execute actionable AI strategies to grow their top line revenue by tens of millions of dollars. And over the past 8 years, we've been very fortunate to work with some influential brands such as Keurig Dr. Pepper, Beam Suntory, Kellogg's, and even Nike. So really happy to be here and helping to decode AI for sure.
Well, I love doing this with you, Frank, because every time I listen to you speak, I walk away smarter. And
likewise.
And you always just break it down in just such an easy way to understand. So I'm excited about this content. In fact, for those of you joining us, Frank and I hosted part one of this series, where we really spent some time laying the foundation of AI as an enabler in contact center operations. And Frank did a great job of just breaking down the umbrella word of AI into its subparts. We talked about generative AI, machine learning, deep learning. We discussed like the evolution. When did AI get started and how did we get here? We talked about things like conversational search, self-service, agent assist, and knowledge management, and them just really having the ability to meet these ever-increasing expectations while scaling our businesses. And when you see compelling numbers like 30 to 45% increases in productivity, it makes generative AI a very exciting solution. So if you need a level set on just what is AI and what are all of the terms, I encourage you to listen to that recording. And we're going to share that link in the chat. Now, in today, the second part of our series, we're going to dive deeper into specific areas where we can explore how to best leverage AI from a process standpoint to organizational dynamics, learning how to set our contact center up for success. So I think I'm ready to get started. And remember, just if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to share those in the chat. We're going to be responding to them. We just want to make the most out of this webinar and give you the things that you need in order to support your own journey. So Frank, last time we talked about what AI is, and I wanted to start today's conversation with just really you sharing your thoughts on how a contact center leader should approach AI.
Yeah, so like you said, the great synopsis of the first webinar, Michelle. I think, our intent there was just to level set everybody. And today, the approach is so vital in terms of making sure that people are thinking of these technologies appropriately. And what I like to say is with intentionality. So in a lot of veins, and we'll talk a little about this here, and we'll share some slides here in a second, really talking about what are the use cases that you should be looking at, and then go from there. So let me share my screen real quick. Michelle, let me know if you can see that.
We've got it.
Gotcha. So like we talked about last time, AI has certainly had a hype in the last 8 years that I've been in business. But with the introduction of ChatGPT and by OpenAI in November of last year, almost exactly a year now, there's been an entirely new hype cycle. And no doubt about it, these technologies are powerful, in some veins, a little magical at times. But generative AI, it's been a glimmer in the eye of many companies in terms of where they can see benefit. And like a precious metal, Michelle, it can bestow immense value for those who are willing to experiment and mine for use cases. We talked about in the last session something known as the Gartner hype cycle. And we talked about the fact that generative AI right now is known at the peak of inflated experience. And what that means is exactly what it sounds like, which is people have an inflated expectation of what these technologies are going to be able to do for organizations, including contact centers. And they're very excited about it. But like many technologies before, this technology is also going to follow the next phase of that hype cycle, which is known as the trough of disillusionment. And that's going to be an interesting dilemma that people are going to face. But why? Why exactly is the trough of disillusionment going to happen?
Well, I want to share something there just on this as you're flipping slides, because I remember working for a big brand, right? Considered innovator, setting at a conference. And it was whenever I just knew there was some new emerging tech that everybody was talking about. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, like I am so behind. I'm so behind. And I'm listening to the speaker, and all of the speakers were all talking about the new tech. And I think it was right when machine learning was coming out. Sure. And so anyway, I remember one speaker gets up there and he's like, okay, everybody raise their hand if you're actually doing this in your company right now. And like nobody, this room was full, nobody's hand raised. And it was like this deep breath of, oh my God, really? I'm not the only one. I feel like I'm so lost. And I think that was such a great lesson for me, because as you're talking about this hype cycle, we do get ourselves so freaked out thinking that I'm behind. I'm a laggard. I don't want to be this, and feel like that we as individuals then aren't well positioned to really lead through these changes within our own company. So I'm excited about just knowing that this is
what you're talking about, right, Michelle, is exactly it. Why do we hit that trough of disillusionment? Well, it's because you're looking at these technologies, and in this case, generative AI or AI, and you're saying, oh, that's a shiny object. We just need to use it. I don't know where, but we just need to use it, right? And that goes back to the purpose of today's conversation, which is really about the intentionality, where to look at for opportunities. How should you be looking at the opportunities? Because the reality is, and like the slide shows, all that glitters is not gold, right? And right now, companies are diving headfirst in this generative AI world, expecting to hit that jackpot of gold. But without a lack of strategic understanding of some of the core use cases that are going to drive the most value, it's going to be hard to implement a successful generative AI strategy for organizations. So there's huge opportunity, no question. And we talked a little bit about this last time, right, Michelle? McKinsey's research has predicted that generative AI is going to yield anywhere between 2.6 and 4.4 trillion dollars annually from a global perspective. And just from a context perspective, the entire GDP of the United Kingdom is 3.1 trillion. So already it's going to see immense value, these generative AI solutions. But if not used appropriately or not done with intentionality, there's going to be a mismatch between what your expectations are and then what the reality is. So even this week, we're starting to see conversations. The Harvard Business Review has just released an article that's titled, "Has Generative AI Peaked?" And all those kind of questions are starting to come up because I think people are starting to recognize this stuff is amazing, but if not done appropriately, there's going to be some real challenges with success and then demonstrating business value. To the organization.
For this assumption, right? I see this too, that whatever the output you get back is accurate. I mean, it can sound really good, but when you start scrutinizing it, you're like, this has never been my lived experience. This is not what I'm seeing from everybody else. But the output and results are very confident and convincing.
It's amazingly confident. It's amazingly confident, right? And that's where, and we can talk a little bit more about this. We spent a little time last time, but the human element, the human judgment is going to be pivotal to be able to perform due diligence against the responses that you're getting. Because at the end of the day, you and I both recognize that the one thing that these technologies are not yet good for is that emotional aspect of it and the accuracy. So what you're referring to is hallucinations. Mm-hmm. That's a big limitation right now of these generative AI solutions. And so it's important, again, with intentionality and strategic approach, how are you implementing these solutions and then mitigating some of those risks that you just identified?
Yes.
So Michelle, I think for the next few minutes, what I want to do is kind of spend our time a little bit talking about three specific things. One is providing a little bit more core context around the use cases that experts in the field have identified as these are going to be the use cases that are going to drive the most value when it comes to these new generative AI solutions. Two, introduce a framework for people to think through where in their organizations they could be leveraging these generative AI solutions, where to dip their toe in, and maybe where to steer clear, at least for the initial first implementations before you go dive deeper.
Well,
and
what I think you're also raising is that thoughtfulness that, like, we've all made this mistake where the technology provider comes with a strong promise that they're making about all of the problems that technology can solve. Yet you get it. It's kind of like I threw the spaghetti against the wall and hope something sticks. That's what tends to happen. And that's why I really am excited about the use cases that you're walking through, because these are real business problems to be solved versus a best guess or just trusting what a provider is promising is going to happen when you do business with them. Because we all know, I mean, going back to your slide here, just all it glitters isn't gold, right? It doesn't quite work out that way. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion around the use cases.
Perfect. And we'll end there. We'll and then open it up for questions. So let's talk about some generative AI value creation use cases. The first is coding and software development. There's going to be immense value from a coding and software development, to the point where these generative AI solutions are going to allow even the most novice developers to generate code very quickly and effectively. And this is not just about developing the next big app, right, Michelle? It's about even automating the daily tasks that we take right now that are tedious and manual and require humans right now to actually do. So, because IT and every organization is already overloaded with more than enough work, these generative AI solutions could help to automate things like filling out CRMs. It could automate things like transcribing and summarizing calls, even sending follow-up emails, without much human interaction and involvement. This is going to help streamline our processes and ensure, our team members are focused on the most valuable, highly value-add activities.
Well, I think about running contact centers, both from the agents as well as the quality teams that were built around the contact centers. When you start talking about coding, I think for so many people, they think it's like how to write the software to do X.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, right, when we're talking about coding, you think about how many keystrokes and how much effort is going in by these agents or even the customer, right, to get something done, to move something through a process. And whenever you can use these AI tools to pull that off, those time-consuming, tedious, what do I want to say, like basic.
It's just non-value add, right? Non-human value
add work, and get them doing more valuable tasks is critically important. And so this makes total sense whenever you're thinking about where might you be looking in terms of a lot of wasted time and effort.
Exactly. Which brings us to the second, which is content, creative content. So, you're aware the ability to generate content now has dropped exponentially in the last few months. And anyone on this call can really quickly, with a couple of free keystrokes, a few keystrokes, generate, content pretty easily. The important thing here is that we have the ability here to adapt the content to various languages now, cultures, grab nuances, and really leverage this so that our customers that we're interacting with are starting to get they're feeling valued and understood, because the content that we're providing them, whether that's an answer to a question they might have, whether that's in-depth information around a product that they're experiencing an issue with, all that content is going to be tailored to specifically what they have. And so they're going to feel more understood as a result of being able to leverage these technologies and answer questions a lot more personalized than we've ever been able to do in the past.
It's exciting. And I know I was recently working with a client. They were doing a large scale, an organizational wide new technology implementation. So in the middle of the deployment, I'm working with them creating all of the training content So this was everything, right, from video training to user guides and manuals. And AI was such a critical role in that. As an example, using avatars to actually teach with screen sharing so they can do the snackable, bite size, learn at their own pace. But on this topic though, around value add, they were in a situation where they have a training department, but their training department, like so many companies are experiencing now, they've been shrunk, right? They've been
stretched so thin, right?
So the timeline it would have taken for their own training department to create all of this content was months, and they didn't have that. So being able to work with, just being able to bring AI in to help with those processes, like ultimately the training departments, that's another good place. Like it's not just for the customer themselves to use, but you're talking about the infrastructure and surround that is enabling your agents to solve problems and learn something much more quickly, and reducing the time to, how much time it takes to get them out on the floor competent, how much time it takes to get them the tools they need in whatever channel or version they need in order to use it. So it's exciting.
It's a great example, right, Michelle, where you're not necessarily removing the human completely. As a matter of fact, I don't suggest that, right? I think it's a function of leveraging AI, right? There's a use case we didn't include in this conversation, but there's a use case where a company named Cyber Inc. actually leveraged generative AI to create scripts around their training material, used an AI avatar like you're talking about, and then was able to translate it into 6 different languages to really open up the regional output of that training and really expand their footprint. And then when changes needed to be made to that training because of changes in process or regulations or whatnot, they were able to very quickly, using the ability to leverage avatars, to reproduce those videos and then have output really quickly, right? So, great example, Michelle, of someone who's, leveraging these technologies to augment, and we'll talk about that, areas of opportunity to augment, but to augment with generative AI solutions. Awesome. The next use case, Michelle, and we talked a little bit about this here in this example, but, customer engagement. We are all familiar with the robotic scripted, chatbots of the past. Well, they're behind us now. Unlike those standard chatbots that have been trained on just predetermined responses and limited questions, these generative AI solutions now are trained on more, natural language. They've been trained with vast amounts of information, and so they're very conversational now. And this, like we just talked about, is going to enable very personalized responses for our customers and our interactions. That's going to just enhance the brand loyalty. And it's going to be incumbent upon, again, recognizing where it's the best use. So again, does that mean that every interaction should be used a virtual agent? Not necessarily. And I think that's where the intentionality, and you probably have examples of this, Michelle, where you're pushing too much, trying to fit everybody a square peg into a round hole. And that's not always going to be a successful strategy either.
Yeah, I love this example, because I think, even just as a reminder, there's the current state, or that we've come from. A lot of companies are still there, where they're so excited with something like an FAQ, where the customer can ask a question. They're provided very quickly using AI an answer that's limited to whatever the knowledge base and knowledge data they've put in, which we all know 9 times out of 10 was frequently outdated. Nobody was maintaining the source. And so the likelihood of that FAQ actually answering the question or solving the problem was slim to none. And now what you're talking about is now being able to have that intelligence in order to produce a response and a result that actually has a much higher likelihood of solving it, because it is the technology is able to leverage everything on the website, everything in other sources, right? It's not just limited to what I included in my 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 knowledge base manual file that had been there before.
Exactly. And I think this brings a great point, which is some of the challenges, right? Is maintaining that data quality, that maintaining that corpus of knowledge, Michelle, because what you've identified is things change in our world daily, hourly sometimes.
Hourly.
Right? So it's important for these virtual agents, if you will, these we'll talk about the next use case, but that they're trained appropriately, that they provide accuracy. We mentioned hallucinations. These are real challenges that are going to be faced, and it's incumbent upon you to recognize, how do I put those foundational layers in place to ensure that we're mitigating that risk as much as possible.
Things like data privacy, security, those types of things are part of that risk.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, when you're looking at these use cases, there should be some, I don't want to say a governing body, but someone who's providing guidance in terms of where, what's appropriate, what information do we feel comfortable using, what don't we, from a privacy perspective. How do we make sure we're not putting our clients and information at risk, proprietary information at that? Those types of questions need to be addressed, and make sure that there are, for lack of a better word, guardrails that people are taking into consideration as they start to experiment with these use cases. And last and certainly not least, Michelle, something called cyber consulting. We talked about this, which is this cyber consultant. We all recognize information is power, and in the age of information overload, being able to provide swift and accurate data retrieval is just paramount. And so generative AI now has the ability, and I'm sure everyone's seeing these, whether you call them private GPTs, custom GPTs, being able to take some knowledge base from various sources, like you mentioned, websites or proprietary PDFs, documents, but really be able to train against that knowledge, vectorize those answers, vectorize that information, and provide answers that are more accurate, that start to mitigate some of the hallucination we've talked about, right? So when a customer is asking for advice about a specific topic, it can be addressed accurately, effectively, and efficiently. And to your point, recognizing, where we should be using these agents, and where we should be actually using this cyber consultant type activity as an agent assist, right? To help the agent get that information quicker. It's a really unique use case. I think we're going to see a proliferation of, what I'm calling the cyber consultant, be available for self-service, but again, also available from an agent assist perspective as well.
So this just occurred to me, as I was listening to you. I think about one of the main challenges, right, companies have, and this is the siloed organizations, right? So it's very dependent on, are people talking? Are you sharing your knowledge, insights, data with one another? Are you working towards a common problem and bringing your intelligence together so the company themselves can create better solutions, whether it be for internal problems or for customer-facing problems? And when I hear you talking about the cyber consultant, I see it being a pathway to break down those silos, because it is able to, again, much more quickly and effectively wrap its arms around all of this information and maybe identify where there's points of connection that maybe have not existed before, and allowing and activating people to come together in a different way.
I love that. I love that. And thank you for bringing that up, Michelle, because what you're hitting on, I didn't mention, right? Which is, this is beyond just providing you information, right? This has the ability, because it has the capability of absorbing information, digesting information, and to some extent, understanding that information. There's opportunity with a cyber consultant to feed it data, actual, tabular data, and have it perform analysis, have it identify opportunities where one part of the organization can be actually working closely with another part of the organization. Can it do it in a silo by itself without human? No. I think we all understand that. but could it give you line of sight? Could it help you brainstorm? Could it help you identify opportunities? Yes, this technology will be able to open up some of those, if for lack of a better word, windows to opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think about how often contact centers, customer service teams particularly, are, they have no control over when and why a customer calls. And oftentimes the things that they are solving are a result of some upstream business process or decision that failed, right? And so I'm thinking about this too as a tool to help identify those emerging things and detect them more quickly, right, to get things addressed, but also learn from, hey, marketing, last time y'all ran that promo,
we had a lift in these types of calls, right? Or something like that. And I think that's one piece of it, Michelle. You and I have both been involved in numerous voice of the customer initiatives over our career, right? And recognizing that no department exists in a silo. The effects of one have the effects on another, right? And being able to see that without necessarily line of sight to that is where these technologies are really going to shine. And to your point, you're going to see, and this is maybe the marrying of more traditional AI that we talked about last time, Michelle, with these generative AI solutions that we're talking about now, more a cooperation of the two technologies that are going to allow you to identify patterns with more traditional AI, but then recognize what is the impact, what is the, what should I be considering, what should I be thinking about with regards to that pattern that we now can make actionable activities against.
Awesome. Love the 4 use cases.
So these are 4 use cases. Again, McKinsey has identified these as driving the most value creation for an organization. And now that we've introduced them, I'm sure the next question is, how can I introduce them into my organization? And what I would argue is there's 2 aspects that you should be considering when you're looking at a process or an opportunity to leverage these generative AI. One is human creativity. The task that you're looking at, how much, what from a requirement perspective, does it have a high degree of imagination that's necessary? Does it have an innovation aspect to it that you should consider? Or is it really about creative problem solving that really you've been leaning heavily on humans to be able to do in the past? The second aspect of consideration you should do is looking at it from a competitive advantage perspective. So competitive advantage, as I look at it, is possessing a proprietary process. Is this unique process to your organization? Is there a unique product that you're looking at? Even a strong brand presence can be a competitive advantage. And so when you're looking at these tasks or opportunities from an AI perspective, if you look at those 2 aspects, you're left with what I've deemed a matrix, right? Where you use human creativity on the y-axis and then competitive advantage on the x-axis. So let's dive into the first kind of bucket on the bottom left-hand corner. These are going to be low human creativity activities, but also low competitive advantage. You mentioned a couple earlier, Michelle, FAQs. FAQs is something right now that organizations, customer contact centers have to answer constantly, right? But there's not a competitive advantage to being able to offer that or answer those questions. So they don't necessitate, intricate human creativity to answer. They're not core from what sets you apart from other people in your industry. So this is where you look at an opportunity to delegate this to an AI, or look for opportunities to identify opportunities for generative AI to play a bigger role in that task. Another example might be, routine report generation, right? So something where you're asking your contact center employee to generate some report that honestly they do manually, but they're gathering the information and you're asking the entire population to do this, where it could be easily an AI could perform that duty and be able to go faster.
Yeah, one of the things I think about on that one is, we have a tendency to go, oh, I'll just automate something that is already broken. So, maybe and so that may be a starting place because you don't really know anywhere else to start. But man, if you can say, do I really need to do this thing? How should it work? And then use AI to design it better. That human-centered design, you would be much better off than trying to just automate something that kind of sucks for for customers.
That's already that's right? Already not effective, right? Yeah. And you're just now doing it faster, but still not effective.
Right.
In those regards. The second one we should look at is those activities, those tasks that are high creativity. They still require a lot of creativity associated, but yet still not a competitive advantage for your organization, right? So these tasks require a creative touch, but not a linchpin to your competitive edge. So scripting kind of content, for example, or responses to unique customer queries, things like that. Creativity still required, but again, not necessarily a competitive advantage for you. These are areas where you, again, want to look at augmenting with AI. So again, maybe an agent assist type solution, or maybe look at partnering or outsourcing those activities, right? So this is where maybe this does fit in a sweet spot of other folks and does lie within their competitive edge. So this might be where you start to have a question around buy versus build. Do I buy these solutions? Do I build these solutions? And have an understanding of where, again, it's going to make the most sense for my organization to take advantage.
And you can show up to those conversations with those providers from a place of much wiser place where you know what you're trying to solve for and can evaluate them against that versus again, as I talked about before, them throwing out the promises and you think, well, okay, well, I'll just move forward without really having a strong use case.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it, right? All that glitters is not gold. So this is where you do it from a more intentionality, recognizing, okay, we know this is a human creativity task, but not necessarily do we have to build this in-house or perform this in-house ourselves. The third is where it is in your competitive advantage, but not necessarily high human creativity aspect, right? And so these are tasks where it makes sense to continue to leverage your human element, your human emotions and aspects, but also offer opportunity to augment with AI. This is where you ask AI to perform a complementary position, right? Maybe this is, be my devil's advocate, offer solutions. What if we're having a crisis at our contact center? What should I be thinking about that I am not currently thinking about today with regards to these solutions? How should I be communicating and making sure that it gives you a draft to begin with, but then also introducing your elements, your experience, your expertise to make sure that coincides with what your brand wants to actually deliver from a communications perspective.
Yeah. I love this in terms of, or when I think about having led agent quality work, right? Agent quality, where are they picking up on the sentiment of the customer and how the AI now can trigger it's their voice is changing. It's getting a little bit escalated. Maybe there's, a trigger to do something different. Whereas before, it was hard for the agents to identify and then even know what to do next. So thinking about how you're still talking to the human, but you have those tools nudging you, hey, here's something you can do to improve the quality of this interaction with the client.
And again, taking some of that, for lack of a better word, kind of mental weight off of those folks, right? Yes. So they're already tasked right now with answering these questions and trying to resolve the issue. And they have pressures from a time perspective and quality perspective, as you mentioned. So having the ability to leverage these technologies, to your point, to measure real-time sentiment, to give you a sense of where they could offer better experience for the clients, it's pivotal, and it could be very, very kind of transformational in terms of what the client is starting to experience for themselves. And then the last box here is those activities that are, what I call your crown jewels. These are where really high competitive advantage. These are high human creativity aspects. These are areas where they're both vital from your differentiation perspective, and they're vital from a human element perspective. And so you mentioned human-centered, right? These are the types of activities that I would argue not where you want to dip your toe in, and at least not initially from an AI perspective, because there's so much that goes into this, and it's so important for your brand or your proprietary information process, products, etc. But is there an opportunity to augment? Yes, I think there is an area of opportunity to augment with AI, but certainly not an area where I would look to, completely delegate or hand off to an AI from this perspective. So this matrix, as you can imagine, Michelle, it's not just theoretical, right? It's a practical guide for thinking of how and where you could deploy these generative AI solutions to stay ahead and ensure that, your efficiency game is also preserved, and what, will truly start to differentiate people's perception of what the customer experience needs to look like in the future.
Yeah, I really loved whenever you walked through this. I saw you pitch on this at a conference, and it just sort of, it allowed me to take a big deep breath, because it was like, okay, now I'm starting to narrow down where I see the biggest opportunity and where I should be looking. So I think this is a really helpful tool.
And I think this really plays well, Michelle. Our workbook that we provided during the last session, we can send a link for those who are interested as well. But that's an area, that workbook is really tasking people to think through potential areas of where they should be looking at. And so this complements that, right? To really look at, there are a lot of people who are promising, like you mentioned, a lot of things. But for you to really look at areas of opportunity, I welcome you to use this matrix as a filter on those use cases to see where should we dip our toe and start to investigate opportunities versus where should we steer clear, at least initially, before we dive deeper.
Yeah, definitely check out the workbook. We spent some time putting that together as just a tool to really help you move from concept and wishful thinking to taking steps toward really getting more specific on what is it I want to go tackle, where should I start, and how can I set myself up for success.
And I love the way we also talked about kind of how do you measure success, because that's going to be the key. And that's a good segue into the use cases. So let's dive into a couple use cases of people who are, leveraging these virtual assistants, generative AI solutions. So there's a company called Swedbank. It's one of Sweden's largest retail banks. They have 8 million private customers. They also have corporate customers, organizational customers, etc. And they have a growing presence right now in the US and China. The bank wanted to improve their customer service by enabling self-service. They also want to reduce the overload of the contact centers themselves, and they wanted to look at new digital services as well. Well, the bank deployed a virtual assistant that can answer customer questions and direct them to appropriate links and web forms based on their questions. The AI was also able to do agent assist, which was helping the bank agents with information searches, helping them with transactions and that type of capability to really provide them a little bit additional support on those complex challenges. The result was that these virtual agents were able to handle 30,000 conversations per month. And the big point was when tasked with the right questions and pointed at the right solutions, they achieved a 78% first contact resolution. They were able to also really personalize. We talked a little bit about personalization in those use cases, but really personalize the customer experience to really take the time and make the customer feel understood, and freed up the agents themselves, like we mentioned before, Michelle, to really do more value-added activities as opposed to these some of this what we call low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. What I like about this example, this case study, is the fact that you're able to experiment and figure out what was the ideal issue type to funnel through the VA and figure out what seemed to fit well so that you can continue to perfect that. I like that. I like that story here.
Yeah, because again, not everything is intended to be solved by an AI, right? So it's
Right.
important that you recognize, and this takes some diligence, right?
Yeah.
We talked about due diligence. Take some diligence identifying where it makes the most sense, and then how do you what's referred to as fine tuning, or
Mhm.
how do you make sure that those virtual agents, those AIs are able to answer accurately, effectively, and efficiently. The next case study is McKinsey. McKinsey's a global healthcare supply chain management in the supply chain management, retail pharmacy, healthcare space, right? They had a general labor shortage and high seasonal volume, as many contact centers do. And they needed help with prescription refill services, Medicare eligibility, verification, etc. They had an existing IVR system, but wasn't able to handle these requests efficiently. And so in many instances, human agents had to intervene with these. So they actually implemented an AI-powered solution that helped automate the prescription refill process and the investigation from a Medicare perspective. They interacted with customers using natural language processing, speech recognition, and even text-to-speech technologies. They were able to communicate and obtain information even from external sources to help solve some of these questions. The result meant having a 24/7 self-service option available for customers with annualized savings from a labor cost perspective of $2.2 million. So, and they were able to deflect a lot of these calls that were, like we mentioned, human intervenes, but now could be addressed by a virtual agent.
Yeah. Well, think about just kind of on that same thread, right? I think about working with in a workforce management team, right? And something happens, volumes start to spike. You don't know why. You are trying to figure out, okay, do I bring in more people to support this volume, or is this spike going to go away in 3 intervals from now? Like, is it a 3-week problem? Is it the next hour and a half? I don't know. So it's a lot of work and effort and waste and expense to figure out how to staff right in those situations, whether again it's seasonal or something's emerging in the company. But when you think about having AI on standby to be able to offset that cost, expense, delay before, I mean, that is just an incredibly compelling scenario.
It's an amazing lever, right? That you can pull when you need it, right? And again, the idea here is now you're freeing up those agents, those ones who can think on their feet, who can address and have the experience to really handle some of these more complex issues that we're now seeing more and more in the contact center space, right? These things that are not just, I have one specific question, can you address it? I'm done. It's more, I have this issue and this issue and that issue. And now you're able to kind of offload the low-hanging fruit again, to be able to address, but then able to spend more value-added time with the agents themselves.
Yeah. Well, I know we're kind of coming in a wrap of when we wanted to wrap this, but I did have one question that I had received leading up to this. What would be some of the pitfalls and watch outs? Because I think we talked a lot about value, how to figure it out, but what would be maybe some of those pitfalls when I'm thinking about AI in my contact center?
Yeah, I think we've named a couple, but let me start with this one, right? Which is trying to leverage these technologies without a direct strategy behind it. And what I mean by that is, again, there's so much being overloaded by on the media right now in terms of the next AI app, the next AI technology. I think one of the biggest challenges is, trying to identify the right areas, and again, with intentionality and strategy behind why you're going after this. So what is the specific business challenge that you're trying to face? And how do you measure success at the end of the day that you actually achieve what you're trying to achieve? That's one of the biggest challenges I think, Michelle, people are going to face, is not having clear line of sight, and trying to experiment with these technologies without that clear line of sight is going to cause a lot of wasted time, effort, and investment. And then some of the other challenges we talked about already, right? Hallucinations, privacy challenges, things around, how do I make sure that this information is being retrained?
Yeah.
All those types of things have to go into consideration as you build these technologies and understand how do I mitigate those risks as much as possible.
I feel so much smarter, Frank. No, it's been good. And hopefully just me coming in and being able to apply just some of my own lived experiences in contact centers, bridging the technology and the information and incredible framework that Frank shared. We're glad you joined us today. I know there's a couple of things we definitely wanted to mention. Frank, do you want to walk through these?
Yeah. So we mentioned a couple of times the workbook, right? So there's a workbook that we're providing to get you started. It's kind of walking you through, how to be thinking about where opportunities lie within your organizations. What are the challenges that you're currently facing? Are there opportunities to partner with other people within your organization to actually marry and start to work together? How do you measure success? How do you measure the challenges and take advantage of those? So we really recommend, downloading that workbook and working through that. If you have any questions or you need assistance, me and Michelle are here every step of the way. We also would like to offer you, those who are in attendance and those watching in the future, a free strategy session. We've included a link in the chat, as well as a QR code here on this slide that you can click on and get access to us for a free strategy session for understand where your areas of opportunity lie within your contact center and whether or not AI is a good fit for there. And then, Michelle, I think you've put it also a link to the recording to part 1 of this webinar, again, helping you level set a little bit about where what AI is and isn't, and the difference between maybe more traditional AI and these generative AI solutions that are really getting hype around right now.
Yeah. Just an awesome session. I'm glad we're doing this. And if there's something that you're interested in learning more about, Frank and I would love to set up some more of these webinars to talk about any of the, what was the word you had? You wanted to make AI approachable. So how we can do that. We're glad to set some of these up, and just thanks for joining. And Frank, as always, I love working with you.
Always, Michelle. Thank you so much. I know you bring a wealth of knowledge from a customer experience perspective. Thank you for allowing me to kind of shine a little AI light in terms of that on that experience. And we both recognize that this technology is not going away. The ability for us to really communicate with each other around where the opportunities lie for AI, and those who are willing to experiment with it, I think, are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of those who are, right now shying away from it.
Agreed. Well, thanks, everyone. You'll have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.